Barakatuh, my dear viewers of IQRA TV. Welcome to Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Bhana. We have been off air for the last couple of weeks because of technical reasons, but I'm sure you saw the program last week with our young people who are engaged in boxing, and a lot of people have fed back to say they really enjoy that program. We're now back live again, and I'm really glad to be back here in the studio. I hope you've all been keeping well. As usual, as I keep saying, I have some really special guests who have been graced us over the past few weeks. Today, I really do have a very special guest with me tonight. His name is Bishop Tony Robinson, a man that I've known for many years. In fact, he just reminded me we've known each other for 21 years. I didn't realize it's been that long. It seemed almost like yesterday. And when you have those feelings, obviously it means that your relationship has been a very good one. And with Tony and I think I would say certainly on my part, I've really been deeply honored that, you know, I can say I've known this gentleman for 21 years, and over that 21 years we worked quite closely together on a number of projects. So today, as I said to you, Tony Robinson, Bishop of Wakefield, previously Bishop of Pontefract. Prior to that, he worked in Leicester. Tony, welcome to IQRA TV.
Thank you very
nice
much.
to have you here.
It's good
I know
to be
we've been
here.
trying to get you here for a few weeks, obviously you're a very busy man.
Yeah, sure.
You know, obviously a very popular man, and therefore we've struggled to find the dates. But finally,
I don't appear on
here.
television every day, so it's not that I'm busy being on television, but
You
busy.
should do. You should do. Now, welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
Obviously, Bishop of Wakefield, and it's 21 years since you've been in this neighbourhood.
It's 21 years since I moved to Wakefield. Yes.
So have you settled down now?
Oh, I think I've got used to it now. Yeah.
And your
it's a
family's
great
obviously
place.
settled down.
Yeah, they've.
I mean, Tony, one of the things Tony has been instrumental with over the 21 years that he's been here, and in his previous role, is work on interfaith work. And Tony was chair of the Kirklees Faith Forum, which ran for a number of years. And anybody who knows about the Kirklees Faith Forum, it was considered to be one of the best interfaith forums in the country. And it did some really sterling work in bringing communities from many different faiths together to share a platform together and look at issues that affected all communities. And in that sense, Tony was really the driving force behind it. Unfortunately, since you left, since you moved your job, and since you had to leave, the Kirklees Faith Forum has disappeared, regrettably. So we're trying to revive that in my area. Yeah. But Tony, how did you get into this work?
Well, I've been ordained now for 35 years, and I began my time as a priest in North London, in Tottenham.
Oh, right,
now, that wasn't a place of people of different faiths, but there were a lot of people from Africa or the West Indies, and I loved that experience of meeting people from different cultures and different places. So when I finished my 3 years training in that place, I then was looking around for another job, and I was offered a job in Leicester.
Right.
So that was right in the heart of Belgrave, which is
very largely Asian community.
Yeah, just down the Golden Mile where all the jeweller shops are. That was part of my parish. And in the 12 years that I was there, obviously you can't live amongst Muslims, Christians, Sikhs and Baha'is and others without getting involved in interfaith. It just became part of our way of life. And at that time, Leicester City Council had a strap line, which when you arrived on the train in Leicester, it said a city full of surprises.
Right.
And it was true, you know, because I met so many wonderful people from different faiths.
Right.
I'd only been there a few months when one of the councillors rang up to say he was going to be the first Asian Lord Mayor of Wakefield, of Leicester.
Of Leicester, yes.
He was a Hindu.
Right.
And he said, I want you to be my chaplain.
Oh, right, that's excellent.
So I said, but surely you'll have a Hindu priest to do that. No, I want to have, like everyone out the mayor, I want to have a Christian chaplain. So that was a real learning experience. It was a learning experience for me, but it was also a learning experience for Leicester City Council, because the very first meal that the Lord Mayor hosted, the City Council put on roast beef and Yorkshire pudding as the main course. So I don't think that was, I think by the end of the year, the food that we had at the Mayor's functions changed greatly. So this is 1985, so they were learning everyone was learning at that point what
Actually,
it was like.
I'm surprised because Leicester City Council was one of the first local authorities in this country that challenged the institution, the law around apartheid in terms of contract compliance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And you know, so that surprises me because they did
well,
some sterling work.
I don't think the catering department.
I don't think
probably
they were not that far.
They were not that far advanced at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
and obviously you know, as you say, in Leicester, you worked with a number of different South Asian communities, both Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, etc. So the dynamics were very different. So how did you find the transition to Wakefield and West Yorkshire? Because you know, we have virtually in Wakefield, we have a one-dimensional community. When we talk about the minority community,
yeah, sure.
Well,
obviously in Wakefield, there is only a very small-ish compared to Dewsbury, Batley, Bradford. There's a smallish Muslim community, but the diocese in which I work, when I came 21 years ago, included places like Dewsbury and Batley, and so I quickly got involved in the North Kirklees Interfaith Council. That was trying to work Christians and Muslims working together. Later on, we put together some projects which got funding. There was a good schools project called Interfaith Kirklees, where hundreds and hundreds of children came on visits to different places of worship, and they got some really good experiences of what it was like to be a Muslim, to be a Christian, to be a Hindu, to be a Sikh, whatever. So we got funding for that, and then we managed to get funding to set up the Kirklees Faiths Forum, which was, as you said, I think, you know, one of the most successful. One of the most successful faiths projects, and that was at a time after the events of 2001 and the events of 2005 with the London bombings, when the government thought it needed to put money into interfaith work. Sadly, with since 2010. All that money has just dried up, and I think probably the world, our communities here need more work on community cohesion, bringing people together to learn, to share, to work on projects together that make some sense.
I mean, I totally agree with you, and I agree that, I mean, what the example is, when you look at what happened in York a few years ago, when the extreme right wing threatened to come and damaged the mosque in York. Actually, what happened was that people from other faith communities, mainly from the Christian community, actually said, no, you're not going to do that, not to, you know, a mosque in our town. And they came and stood outside the mosque to stop anybody coming and attacking the mosque themselves. And that was because of the strong work that had taken place around interfaith. So obviously interfaith, you know, as far as you're concerned, is something that is very valuable. And I certainly subscribe to that, because we worked in Wakefield first. And then when I came back to Dewsbury, you know, Batley, we started working there as well. And I subscribe to interfaith work. But how do you see the future of interfaith work in light of what you just said, that austerity has been one of the main drivers of sort of probably undercutting all that work? I mean, the schools were project that you just mentioned. That was bringing Muslim, Christians, Hindus, Sikh,
everyone together,
or even kids with no faith, for example, bringing them together to show them, you know, the principles and the values of all these faith communities. I mean, how do you see that continuing? I mean, what is the future for those young kids in terms of learning about other people?
I think it's a great shame that those visits stopped. When we set up the project, within a couple of years, we'd won an award for learning outside the classroom. There was only 2 other places that won that award, and that was Canterbury Cathedral and St Paul's Cathedral in London, where they have educational visits. But here in Kirklees, we'd actually got this award because of the good work that was doing. I mean, schools are bringing, you know, their children, primary and secondary, and then we also developed work with the parents. So some parents thought, well, we don't want our children going to a mosque or to go into a temple, and so we worked with some of those parents to go on visits before their children went. And actually parents all enjoyed those visits too, because actually, you know, when you go to the place of worship, you're just made welcome. That's the important thing, because right at the heart of anybody's faith is to welcome our neighbour.
And have you, I mean, this is something I'm trying to work on at the moment. We've seen a lot of visits from other faith people or people of no faith into mosques. But have you seen much traffic going the other way? Because I certainly haven't.
No.
And that's something I'm trying to do now.
I mean, I think we have to make those opportunities to make sure that people are invited. So often it's been to go to celebrations in other places of worship, but actually as Christians we need to be inviting people to come to our celebrations too. And there have been some good occasions. I mean, I think you came in Wakefield after the Manchester bombing, which is coming up to a year ago, and we walked through town, 400 or 500 people, and we went to the cathedral, and the cathedral was full of people from both communities. So I think there are significant moments I can look back on where we've actually managed to achieve that.
I've been to Wakefield Cathedral on a number of occasions, on a number of celebrations, including after the death of Lady Diana, when we had the Princess of Wales, when we had the memorial service for her. And anybody who lives in Wakefield, I would certainly urge, if you've not been to the cathedral, you should go inside. It's a magnificent building, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot of history of the Christian faith community in Wakefield. And it was one of the main cathedrals, places of worship for a very large area, wasn't it? It still is, I presume.
Yes,
Wakefield
it is.
Cathedral.
Yeah, sure. The diocese used to cover Calderdale, Kirklees, Wakefield and Barnsley. It's now a much bigger diocese because it's now called the Diocese of Leeds. So it goes right up to Richmond and to Skipton, and the whole of Leeds and Bradford. But we have 3 cathedrals, one in Bradford, one in Ripon and one in Wakefield, and they all try to serve their local communities.
Right. I mean, coming back to young people, obviously at this moment in time, post-Brexit and everything else, we've seen the rise of the right at the moment. There's been more attacks on Muslims, and we've seen, we're not going to mention too much about the Punish a Muslim Day, which is something that we don't want to give too much publicity to.
Absolutely.
Which is causing a great deal of concern.
I'm sure it is.
But the work in schools that you're doing, where you're bringing children from different communities together, I mean, you saw that as being valuable.
Yeah, sure.
But also the work that they did with parents, because I remember that parents objected to, we don't want our children to learn about Eid, for example, or Ramadan, or Lent, etc.
Yeah, sure.
How important that work should continue now?
It is very important. I mean, I think hardly a day goes by where there's not something in the news, both here in England or around the world, which isn't faith-based. And all the stuff about terrorism, anybody think the only terrorists were Muslims at one point, but actually we've learned in America and sadly here, with some of the recent attacks, the Finsbury Park one, that it's possible for white English people to be radicalised as well. And we all need to be educated about each other. There's nothing to fear about each other. And when people go on visits to mosques and temples and gurdwaras and churches, then they're learning not just facts about those faiths, but they're actually learning that there are people there, and actually they're not very
building
different
up
from
trust.
us. It's about trust.
Yes.
And so the fruit of that work, which sadly has stopped, could be in 5, 10 or 20 years as these young children grow, that they've got a different appreciation of people of other faiths than... I mean, I think on the whole, the majority of people in England are very tolerant. They're very accepting of people of different faiths, have welcomed people into their communities. But the danger is that there's a few people in both communities, Christians and Muslims, and perhaps people of known faiths, who just are, I don't know, misled and don't trust other people, the stranger.
Radicalised.
Sometimes it's radicalised, sometimes it's just hatred. It's just out and out fear of the unknown. And actually when, my experience is when you live next door to a person of another faith and you begin to talk and share and learn, you actually find they're good neighbours.
Yeah, and I think that is a very important point that Tony makes in the sense that sometimes people who came from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh in the past, obviously they came here, our forefathers who didn't have enough knowledge of the English language, and therefore they made themselves insular. They did not open themselves up to others, and therefore we have these communities developing where there's not been that sense of camaraderie maybe or engagement with other people. I mean, young people now are much more, obviously we're born in this country, we now got fourth generation young people here, went to schools, universities, become professionals. And have you noticed any change in the generations? Because I know you
Yes.
working in Wakefield and in like you say in Dewsbury and Batley.
Sure.
Have you noticed a change happening
Yes,
that young people are much more willing to engage
Yes.
and build up bridge and relationships, etc. Compared to
I mean, on the whole, I don't think children notice the differences. I think that children are more accepting of each other. Our children grew up and went to school in Leicester with Hindu and Muslim and Sikh. They weren't looking at those as differences. They were seeing them as friends, as fellow human beings. We're all part of one human race. We're not different races. We're just one human race, and we need to accept that we have different faith beliefs and we come from different cultures, but that's part of the excitement of life. It would be awful if we were all the same. And we've learned from each other, and I think the more people have got to know their neighbours, I mean, sometimes language was a problem, I think, 20 or 30 years ago, but actually those I don't think those issues are quite so great today. And you do see lots of young people, gangs of young people now, mixed gangs of people walking around, sharing. I don't think those young people, our hope is, in the future that actually that can only be for the good, really.
In terms of the work, I mean, the mosques and the churches and the gurudwaras and the temples, the mandirs can do, what would you like to see? I mean, the church, I know, you've been instrumental, you've been proactive, you've gone out there and sort of started, we need to be together, we need to join forces, we need to join hands, we need to look at our communities. Have you seen similar actions from the other sides coming forward as well? Because I'm personally being very critical of our communities.
Right.
And maybe it's because there's a fear. One of the fears in the past I know was, if you get too close, they might anglicize us, or they might, convert us into Christianity.
Sure.
Now, obviously, I think young people are much more robust now, much more comfortable and much more knowledgeable about their own faith. But do you see more of that happening now, or is it less of it?
I think there are some good young people in Wakefield who are really keen to be showing the positive side of Islam. They've come to me, they want to do things. We work on some projects together. They gave out flowers the other week around the town. They've been giving out, a couple of weeks ago, they gave out food to the homeless and things.
Oh, fantastic.
So I think that there are some good young people around, and I think that's a hopeful sign. In order for the community who came here, I think they needed to find friends who were going to welcome them. And I think that's taken time. But now when you've made relationships, when you've built friendships, then I think you can trust each other and you don't fear that you're trying to sort of convert anybody, but you actually want to work together for the good of the local community in which you live.
I mean, I don't know whether you remember the Casey review that came out last year,
sure,
Dame Louise Casey.
I met her when she was doing her review.
Oh, right,
yes.
I mean, one of the things she talks about is ghettos or communities not engaging with each other, segregated communities, etc. There is an element
but she always directs that towards people of other faiths.
Yes.
And I think I could give you examples of white communities that are very, some of our estates that are solidly white, indigenous, are just the same. They don't mix with the communities down the road. I live in a poshish bit of Wakefield, and down the road there are 2 or 3 council estates. There's not much mixing between those two communities. So I think just to single out people of other faiths as if they're trying to hide together, I think unless you've got friends who invite you to come, and make friends, I think, friendship's a two-way thing. It's not just, expecting the new community to make inroads. I mean, we've had people from all over Eastern Europe come here, and there are language difficulties there. And sometimes they've stayed in their little, and they're not people of other faiths, they're often Christians, but they've stayed in their little ghettos. Perhaps it's not much different from when the Brits and others went abroad in colonial times, and when we used to live in ghettos there. Right?
Well, I remember being interviewed by the Today programme after the Casey review came out, and I actually mentioned that because I don't know whether you read David Niven's book, The Moon's a Balloon.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, David Niven was a famous actor, raconteur, and he wrote a book about being English in America. And it actually highlights the point you've just made, how the English became very insular.
Sure, yes,
because they feared the outside world and how it might impact
Absolutely.
on them.
And we took everything from England with us.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? I've been to Pakistan 3 times. You know, some of the
Yeah,
churches.
I want to talk to you about that after
some
the
of the
break.
some of the churches there could be in the middle of England. I mean,
Yes.
they weren't built in a Pakistani style. They were they were built in an English style. We took everything with us and tried to recreate England in other places.
Yes, and if you go to China, I mean, there's a very famous street in Beijing where the houses in a row of houses, they all look as if they were a Victorian row of houses in this country. You know, it's basically implanted over there.
Absolutely.
So I mean, you're absolutely right. People, when they move, they try and sort of retain their identity, their culture. So that's something I want to talk to you about your Pakistan work, because you've done some phenomenally good work across in Pakistan as well. We're going to be going for a break, but I mean, this issue about fear, you know, that which drives some people, and we've seen one of the worst cases of fear, where one of my very dear friends, Joe Cox, was murdered as a consequence of this guy's mindless, fear of Brexit or Europeans inundating our shores, and wanted to keep Britain sort of British in a way. I mean, are we still British?
Well, I think we have to define what British is. I mean, British is now a wonderful mix of people. You know, the whole world has come to live in England, and is that a good thing? I think part of God's plan to mix us all up so that we learn a bit more from each other, rather than all being, in our own
become
country.
friends with each other, and respect each other, and value each other.
It must be part of God's plan that we do
I
that.
hope so, inshallah. Yes,
absolutely.
Inshallah. And I know you've been to many mosques, and you've been a guest of many mosques as well. I mean, we've shared many meals together in the past, and I think the more of this that happens, obviously, is important. And we'll be going for a break now, inshallah. When we come back, Bishop Tony has been working in Pakistan. As he said just now, he's been to Pakistan 3 times, and he's worked there. And I think some of the work that he's done is something that we should all learn from. So when we come back, inshallah, we'll talk more about that. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Make yourself a cup of tea if you want. Don't go away. Inshallah, we'll be back soon. In the meantime, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And if you have any questions to Bishop Tony, please make sure you have the number on the screen. Feel free to call, and I'm sure Bishop Tony will be very happy to answer any questions that you may put forward. Okay, thank you very much. Inshallah, see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're enjoying it, by the way.
Indeed,
I mean, obviously,
good.
As I just, when people say to me, "What's the format going to be like?" I say, "Is this like a fireside chair discussion or conversation?" I mean, your work in Pakistan. I hope we're not going to quickly go for another break now. Your work in Pakistan. Obviously, you've been doing this for a number of years. How did you start it? When did you start it?
Well, when I came here, I got to know Yaqub Masih, who's
from Huddersfield.
From Huddersfield.
Yes.
And he's very passionate about his brothers and sisters who are Christians in Pakistan. And he's, there have been many instances of, sadly, attacks on Christians.
Unfortunately, yes.
And everyone condemns these things. I mean, rightly, the government in Pakistan and people condemn them. But actually, Yaqub and I have tried to say we need to be practical now. What can we do to make a difference in these situations, rather than just everybody condemn it? Because it actually needs to be something
real
different.
Real
practical action. So over the past 15, 18 years, we've raised lots of money when there have been instances, and we've been out there to actually give into the hands of those families who've been affected actually some cash in order to help them. Rather
rebuild
than
their lives.
To rebuild their lives after a tragedy. And some of those tragedies have been awful. Bombings, and we've given money not just to Christians, but also to Muslims as well. So, for example, when the Peshawar Army School was attacked, I think it was 3 years ago, we managed to raise money here from Christians and Muslims to pay for a psychologist to work with the children, because the children are bound to be traumatized when your school is attacked by terrorists in that way. And so I think we've been working on that for a long time. But we wanted to be practical, and after there was an attack on Christians in Gujarat, which is near Faisalabad, in 2009, we managed to persuade the Foreign Office to give us some money. because we had this plan that we would try to bring a group of Christians and Muslims from that town to England.
Right, I've been told we're going for break now, so we'll hold the thought.
Right, okay, we'll come
we
back.
will come back to it, because I think that is really crucial. Bringing people across and taking people over there and showing them how communities in this country work together, regardless of faith, etc. So we'll come back to that. I've now been told our technical glitches have been sorted out. Inshallah, we're going for a break. Inshallah, we'll see you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.